So let's get started with our ingredients. Obviously, we're going to need some potatoes. We've got some onions, thyme, leeks, and parsley. The parsley is actually just going to be used for garnish. A little bit of olive oil. Here we have chopped garlic, ground black pepper, salt, and not needed, but I like it in mine, is a little bit of mustard. I like to add a little bit more heat. So you don't have to put it in, but I really enjoy adding it. We'll start with rendering a little bit of bacon. I'll chop that up for you. You'll need yourself one good size pot. This looks like a 10 quart, but we're going to end up making about 2 quarts. And this is some pre-made stock that I have. I'll explain why we have the colander, because it makes it so much easier to wash the leeks out, because as you know, they get really dirty inside the leaves. And have an extra bowl, because once you've rendered the bacon, you want to take half of it out for garnish later. All right. So as you can see, this is a home style kitchen. Anybody can do this. These aren't fancy pots and pans, not a fancy knife. Anybody can do this. All right, let's get started. So we're going to get the oven going. I just want it warm while I'm cutting the bacon. I'll increase it a little bit later, but I don't want anything to burn. So it's just on warming up the pot. Now we're going to come back over here. We don't have to do anything special with the bacon. I'm just turning it into 1/4-inch slices. Just like that. 1/4-inch, 1/2 inch, whatever. It really doesn't matter. It's gonna shrink as it cooks. What you're doing here is you're just getting it to the point where it's easy to render. Render basically means get the fat out of it. These aren't my usual knives, so they aren't maybe as sharp as I'd prefer, but that's okay. Just always be careful when you're using knives. Don't rush. There's no point. You're not in a hurry. But yeah, so the whole point of rendering is just to get the fat out so you can cook the rest of the ingredients in. There we go. Now for people who, have more of a vegetarian type diet, obviously skip this part. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different options for, an oil or a base to use to start frying. You can use your coconut oils, your olive oils. Sesame is a great oil to use. I think it's really underutilized in the kitchen, in most people's home kitchens. It's got lots of health benefits as well. You just have to be really careful that you don't smoke it. So all right, we're just gonna put it in. So like I said, this will yield roughly 8 large portions. Turn that up. All right, I'm going to wash my hands. So you can hear it sizzling. And again, this isn't a rush. You don't want to burn anything. You just want to be able to get that fat out of there so you can cook the ingredients later. And don't get mad at me for putting the spoon up there. That's just how I do it. All right, so now we're going to go to the leeks. Some people use the whole stem, stalk, stem, all that. I like to use just under where it starts blending the lighter into the darker colors. This you can use for a different soup stock later. And obviously we chop it right there. Now I'm going to show you how to chop it to save yourself all that time trying to clean in between all of it. So take that off. Take that off. Like I said, you can save this for making a soup base. Now, you're always going to have dirt in there. It doesn't matter how clean it looks right now. If anybody's ever done anything with leeks, you know the moment you start, oh, this one's actually pretty clean. But either way, let's pretend that it wasn't. So what you do, and yes, I know we cut meat on here first, and we should get a new cutting board. Everything's going into the pot. So it's okay to, to use it after cutting a protein. So now, if you chop it up like this, as you can see, now it falls apart, and it's going to be so much easier when you run it underwater for the water to just come out, and you don't have to go leaf by leaf. And because we're going to blend this afterwards, there you can see quite a bit dirty there. Because we're going to blend this afterwards, you don't have to worry about making each slice exactly the same. Alright, so come back here, grab the colander. Alright, and then we'll go on to the second one. Same thing, right there. Right about there. This knife is really small for my hand, so please don't copy any technique I'm using. It's very difficult. I guess a good way to look for a chopping knife while we're here is that if you're in the store and you're holding it, make sure your knuckles don't come down further than the bottom of the blade, because every time you come down, you're going to lift the blade and you're just going to hit your knuckles. So you'll notice mine are all like Japanese chef's knives, usually an 8 to a 10 1/4, and those work really well for rocking back and forth and getting a good motion to chop. Like I said, I'm modifying it right now to make this work, because you know what? Not everybody's going to have expensive knives. Alright, so if we take a look at the bacon, this tells us, because we're getting a few brown spots, we're probably going to want to move it around a little more frequently. Like I said, you don't want to burn anything, because you can't get the taste of burn out of a soup no matter how hard you try. So always keep moving it around. Stop what you're doing if you're cutting, because this portion of it sets up the rest of the soup, the quality that's going to come out. That's actually looking really good. You can see the meat is starting to separate from the fat. Very nice. I'm going to take this over to the sink. I'll be right back in a sec. Alright, so we got the leeks washed. They'll be ready. That'll be the next thing to go in here, along with onions. As you can see, this is rendering out really well. Another 3-4 minutes and we'll scoop out half of it, put it over here, and then we'll start adding the ingredients that we want to soften up a little bit. Now, for those who have never cut onions, I'm going to show you two ways just because we're here. This is mostly getting blended up, so you don't need to fine chop it. But for those who don't know how to dice, just make little slits. Leave like the last quarter of it uncut, but just make little slits along the length of an onion. Guess it's easier if I move my hands like this. And then what that does is when you go back and cut this way, there's all. This is the end of it, so it doesn't quite look as good, but there. See, then they're all the different layers just come apart, and you've got a finely diced onion without having to put it through like a dicing press. Yeah, now we're just going to make a mess. That's okay. But now you know, this isn't necessary at all. I was just showing you that. Because at this point, make it sit roughly the same size as the leeks. What that really does, it makes sure it all cooks at the same rate. So I'll chop this one up. Yeah, our bacon's getting really close to being done. Yeah, so how I'd normally do it is I would just chop it into like 1/2-inch pieces and then just chop down. Get to the end, same thing. There you go. So we've got everything that needs to go in soon right here. Let's take a look back in here. You can usually tell when the bacon's pretty much ready because it'll start sticking slightly and you'll get a little bit of browning on the edges of the bacon. So this is 2 minutes away. So a good way to tell when it's basically done is you'll start hearing more popping as opposed to sizzling, and you'll get this really nice golden brown color underneath. And don't worry, it's not burning, it's sticking. As long as you get it at this point, that's it. It's almost like caramelizing it. It's released all the fats. This is all going to come out into your soup later, and this is where all the flavor really comes from. So we'll quickly pull out, or not. Scoop that, another scoop. Maybe we'll take out a third instead of half. Then you've got all this left in here. That's going to get blended in with everything else. So then we're going to add all these leeks. Oh, it smells amazing in here, people. And all of our onions. And then start moving them around. Really nice colors as well. So depending on your stove, how hot it runs and what, you're probably more familiar with your stove. This one cooks a little hotter than it should, so I have it at basically medium to just over medium. We're not frying, we're sauteing because we want this softened. You got all those nice fats that have been released. See now everything, remember how I said it wasn't burnt? Look how it's nicely releasing. See how it's all releasing off there, and it's coating these vegetables so nicely. Because the water is like, you could also deglaze it if you want. Not really needed because this is a soup, but if you wanted to deglaze it, you could use a little bit of white wine or vermouth. Or brandy or port or whatever you seem to like best, but not necessary. It's building up all the incredible flavors as it sautés here. So, I'm going to leave that for a few minutes, and we're going to get on to cutting up the potatoes. So when it comes to the potatoes, once again, it's going to get all blended up, mostly. But if you like it like pureed, please puree it. You can do it in a, like an industrial strength blender or like a Vitamix or something like that. I prefer actual substance in mine, so I'm going to blend, but there'll still be chunks. So you don't want to rough chop it like pieces like that because whatever's left might be a little too big. So I'm going to cut them into roughly 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch cubes. Now, skin on, skin off is completely your choice. There's no right or wrong answer. If you like it, you do it that way. I actually like the skin on, so that's what I'm going to do. Cutting potatoes, nothing special about it. There's no special technique. Do it whichever way you find easiest. I like to do them into slices first, because then what that does is I can then start, this one's not quite as good, but you can start turning them into fairly close identical sized cubes. Now again, we're blending, so that's not a huge deal, but if you get into the practice of doing it like this, then when you go and you make a more whatever you want to call it, specialized dish where you're trying to keep everything consistent, you're used to turning out everything into a really nice formal style that really blends with the rest of the dish. Like, we'll do a minestrone one day, and you'll see I really like to keep everything a uniform size. The peppers, the beans, the potatoes you cook in, the pasta you put in, and I usually run it off the size of the pasta that I'm using, because then everything has a really, really nice uniformity to it. And if you're worried about it sliding around, just cut a little tip off the bottom. There. Now it doesn't move. But as you can see, like, it's pretty easy to cut things roughly the same size. And you don't have to be massively particular on it. I just happen to really enjoy cooking. So it's one of those things that I do just to, I don't know, it just makes it a little more enjoyable when you perfect it a little bit. Some things I just love to rough chop and bam, 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 bam. But, you know, no, I'm just talking too much. That's the Italian part. All right. Now you'll never see me do that with one of my nice knives. I never go across the board with them. That's why sometimes it's good to have, you know, your kind of throwaway set. I also don't use plastic cutting boards, but this is what we have on this location. You know, a question I do have for everyone watching, and I do appreciate everyone watching, what backgrounds do you guys like when it comes to watching the videos? You know, like we've shot at Sorrentino's, so it's more of a commercial kitchen. Do you like that? Do you prefer these more nice, intimate home cooking backgrounds? You know, which one do you prefer? I'd love to hear it. So please put in the comments, what type of scenarios, scenes, cooking environments do you prefer to see? I mean, sometimes it's good to change it up, but, you know, a little secret, we are building our own production kitchen to do these, you know, each of these episodes, but we'd really like to know what you'd like to see the most. Maybe there's a theme you saw, maybe you were traveling one time somewhere in the world and you thought, oh my goodness, that's such a beautiful kitchen. One day I'd love to cook in a kitchen like that. So yeah, we'd love to hear. And please, you can make it as detailed or as minimal detail as you want. Just, we'd love to hear from you. All right, so almost done here. Actually, before I forget, let's get back over here. Give it a quick stir. There we go. So when it starts browning on the bottom, you're basically getting there, because what's happening now is the vegetables are now starting to caramelize as well. So you don't want anything to burn, so always keep it moving. And a lot of people ask why, you know, I always add garlic closer to the end or when there's more liquid, because garlic burns very quickly. It'll ruin the whole taste if you go too early. So this is why I tell people, make it, you know, add it 2/3 the way through, and always make sure you have a lot of moisture when you are using it. Unless if you're frying, make it one of the last things you put in. All right, so that's actually getting really close. So I'll finish these up. The other problem with knives that are the wrong size is you will get little calluses and blisters because you're not moving them in proper, you know, in a situation that you're used to. All right, so these are all cut up, but they're not actually needed yet. You want to build the soup base up as well as possible. So at this point, when we're still frying, before I add the stock in, I like to put in my greens, like all my seasonings, herbs and all that, because what happens is when you're still using, you've still got that very direct heat of the oils that are in there and the fats. That reacts differently than just putting it into a soup later because it just slowly releases. This, I don't want to say caramelizes, but it turns it into more of an essence, which really spreads throughout the flavor of your of whatever you're making. All right, so that was, like I said, under a minute. It even starts softening up a bit. See, like I said, you don't want to burn anything. Just going to move some stuff around. Now, for much the same reason we put the thyme in early, I also like to add in my seasonings, spices, and all that kind of stuff. Now, I know people are going to say, you never add salt now. I like to add a little bit at the beginning. Like, look, this is barely, sorry, it's a bit humid here. It's barely anything. But I like to have it in there at the beginning because that's the way I like to do it. We'll salt to taste at the end. I like a little bit while cooking. Got the black pepper. Again, this one you don't have to do, or you could do a spicier one or less or more. I like putting in the mustard, especially a nice hearty seedy mustard. And then garlic as you like it. This is maybe 2 tablespoons chopped garlic. We do have enough fats in there to render everything. But what I like to do, and I know this says a third, but it's actually a quarter, I just didn't want to spill. I like to add some olive oil right now. I'm Italian, I love olive oil everywhere. But if you could smell this kitchen right now, you'd understand the place of all these ingredients. See, and the idea is if you get down here to the bottom of the pot, I don't know how it's going to look in there. It may look a little darker, but it's actually a really nice golden, like a darker golden brown. This is what you're looking for just before you add your soup base. It's actually not burnt. Like I can take it off easily if you see this. That's definitely not a problem. But once you have it there, and see how everything's nice and soft, now we're ready. So, I'll put this over here. And this is roughly 2 quarts, 2 liters, 8 cups of homemade chicken stock. Beautiful. Look at that. This smells amazing. I know you can't smell it over the TV, but just take my word for it. And if you ever made a really good soup with a lot of really good fresh ingredients, I'm sure you can understand how good this smells. Now, the potatoes won't go in until this has a nice simmer for at least half an hour. I want this by itself to simmer for at least half an hour. Then we'll probably put the potatoes in for another half an hour. And then we're going to do an emulsion blend, a rough blend we'll call it, because I want texture in there. For me. For you, you could do it as much as you want. But we'll come back and we'll show you putting the tomatoes, wow, the potatoes in. And then we'll be back after that to show you how to blend it up. All right, so she's been simmering for half an hour, and the place smells amazing. Yeah, everything's working itself together. So we're ready for the potatoes. Oh, and for those who haven't seen it before, I always like to put down either a damp towel or damp paper towels so the board doesn't slide when you're using it. It doesn't typically when you use a wooden cutting board, but everybody seems to have these plastic ones now. So just be gentle. You don't want a bunch of splashing. You don't want to hurt yourself. You're not in a rush. These things are going to have to cook for 25 minutes anyways, so rushing them in there isn't going to help. There we go. Now this was 5 small to medium potatoes. You judge accordingly. But it'll make for a really nice hearty soup. There you go. All right, up next we're going to blend this up. We're going to bring it back up to a light boil, heavy simmer for 25 minutes, and then we'll be back to blend it up. Okay, so we've had it boiling a little over a half hour. Couldn't even lie to you because the clock's back there. Now, the place smells absolutely amazing. I know a lot of people are going to ask, I didn't see you put in a bay leaf like everybody else does. I'm going to be completely honest, not that I don't like the taste, I just find it doesn't really add the profile that I like the most. So if you like bay leaves, put bay leaves in. If you don't like bay leaves, don't put them in. You don't have one, don't put them in. I use them so infrequently that there's no point keeping them around for no reason. So I think the potatoes are done. And that's the nice thing about chopping them a little finer. Let's find one and figure out if I'm right. Oh yeah, we're right. So, got that there. Got our handy little emulsion blender thingy. This is a dual speed. All right. So, make sure you put it in the liquid before starting it. I see a lot of people spinning it, putting it in, and making a mess. This is boiling, by the way. I actually recommend people turn it down when they're doing this. And at this point, you make it as smooth as you want. I don't mind little pieces of bacon. Actually, you know what? And I already forgot because I was talking. If you don't want the stalks in there, this is a good time to take out the thyme. There you go. It's a really good time. I promise I won't do that again. I'm sorry. So what do we got here? One more. I mean, if I wasn't so lazy, I could have counted how many stalks went in the first place. But this looks about right. I'll give it one more stir just to check. But I think we are stalk free now. All right. Let's get mess making. This one's quite powerful, so I don't see it taking more than, 30, 45 seconds. And again, you blend it as much as you want. And if you see, some stuff stuck to the sides, push it back down. Now I know a lot of people, they like a really, really, really almost stew type base with this kind of stuff. I still like it to be a soup, to be honest. So you'll notice it's a little, some people it's almost like a paste is the way they like it. This is kind of how I like. So it's still very, very hearty. And if we get the camera in here, you can see that you can still see little bacon pieces and such. I'm going to blend it just a little bit more, but it's pretty close to where I like it. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's how you like. You're the one that's got to eat it. Your guests are the one that has to eat it. So you enjoy it how you want to enjoy it. And if your guests don't like it, guess what? They can go cook for themselves. All right, that is done. So, you can even see on here, you got nice little flecks of bacon, so you know it's in there, a little bit of fibers from the leeks. Call that a success. So I brought it back up to a very low simmer. You're getting bubbles coming through, but because there's less, liquid on its own now, you can burn very easily. So don't do that. I've got this all the way down at 3, which is roughly like a third. And I just want it to get this little rolling bubble for another 10 to 15 minutes, depending on whatever consistency you like. And as you can see, it will still thicken up now that you've moved all that starch around. So, we'll put the lid back on. We'll be back in 15 minutes. Alright, so she's reached just the perfect consistency. I've already salted it to taste. You do it according to what you like. If you got to taste it 2-3 times to get it perfect for you, that's what you do. It's better to add a little bit at a time and get it to where you want it instead of going too much right up front and ruining the whole batch. So this is exactly how I want it. So now it's time to ladle some soup. Perfect. I'll come over here. We got some bacon. Got some cheese. And this is a cheddar provolone parmesan mix. And we got some parsley. And then a tablespoon of olive oil. There we go. And on the side here, we've just made up some nice grainy toast with some garlic butter and paprika on it. And now the moment of truth. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And then these, because I love to dunk. Oh yeah. Move that cheese around. Another nice touch would be some Greek yogurt or something. Right in the little dollop right in the center before you build everything else up. Otherwise, this is amazing. Oh yeah.